Please welcome Tobias Leenaert.
Thank you very much. Hello everybody here and online. It's good to see you all. For the ones who are here, thank you for coming and for keeping this conference going. I'm glad it's happening again, even if our numbers are a bit smaller than other years. So I'll be talking about when plant-based becomes big business. And here's a little overview of what I'm going to tell you. So a little overview of how things have changed in the last few years, about the downsides of this big growth and this future growth, about the upsides, and for the upsides I will use the case of the vegetarian butcher. I will consider some other factors that are important here, then talk about what activists can do around this, and a conclusion. So things have changed. Things have changed a lot, and I'm not talking about COVID here, I'm just talking about maybe the last 5 years within the plant-based and vegan sector or space. We used to be able to eat only at places like these, and now we can eat at places like these and at places like these. This is 11 Madison Avenue, a restaurant in New York that reopened as a vegan restaurant after the COVID crisis and had a 15,000 people waiting list right from the start. We used to be able to eat only things like this. Well, maybe not you because you're a bit younger than I am, but I used to eat these millet cakes, and now I still eat them, by the way. But now we can eat stuff like this, very convincing meat alternatives. The people who used to talk about our topics used to look like this a long time ago, and now some of us look like this, very professional looking activists, and some even have opened businesses, have started businesses, and that's what I want to talk about. So if you look at the evolution, plant-based meat alternatives, they were first of all cooked up in a little kitchen by one person, a little team, and sold very locally, etc. And then these companies grew a lot bigger. This is Vivera. Over the years, it's grown to be quite a big company. And then still bigger, and they went to the stock market, like Beyond Meat, and became world famous. And then plant-based substitutes were even produced in the later years by companies like, these are the CEOs of Danone and Tyson Foods, dairy and meat companies, right? And the question is, what do we think of all this? And of course, all this enormous growth has also been financed by people with deep pockets, you know, venture capitalists, people who got very rich and who are going to get even richer from all this growth. And we have now an incredible space of numerous, countless companies who are producing meat alternatives, dairy alternatives, who are funding this, who are facilitating this, who are researching this, etc. It's become an incredible space that is more and more, of course, commercial. So basically what's happened in the last 5 years is a tremendous scaling up of these plant-based alternatives. And of course, there are some downsides to that. And I think that many people of you here will see quite a bit of problems with capitalism. I think capitalism has brought a lot of growth and has gotten people out of poverty, but there are also humongous disadvantages or downsides to capitalism, like inequality and the maximalization of profits, environmental costs that are not internalized, the fact that greed and materialism are encouraged, monopolies, exploitation of workers, of animals, etc. And especially, I think, there's no appreciation of the fact that people have different skills, have different talents, are gifted unequally from the day they were born, so that they have different opportunities in society, no matter how equal we create our society. So there's always going to be this inequality. And I think there's also some emotional feeling that we have about smaller things. On my way here, I stopped in Haarlem, a city in the Netherlands, and I saw this very cute little coffee shop. And it said there, if you have to make a pit stop this weekend, there was a Formula 1 race there. If you have to make a pit stop, support an independent business and do it here. And I think many people will agree that there is something that feels very good about supporting a small, independent business and an independent business owner. And it feels completely different than having a coffee here, right? So these smaller things feel more beautiful to us. So it's not going to be small anymore. And it's also not going to be local, social, artisanal food. You know, it's going to be industrially processed food, etc., etc. And for people who don't like that, that's a big downside. There's also the problem of greenwashing. There might be companies who, first of all, eat up other vegan companies to just maybe kill them, or there might be companies who just do it to greenwash, to show that they're doing something, but it's actually not very significant. Those are downsides. And I think you can come up with a lot more. Again, I see many problems with capitalism. I think it can be improved tremendously, but still, I'm also going to talk about the good side of the system that we have and of the scaling up that has been happening. And for that, I'm going to talk about a couple of companies. I'm going to state, first of all, very explicitly that I have no ownership, no shares, no stocks, whatever in these companies. I'm not involved in these companies at all. I'm stating it very explicitly here. This is me stating it, okay? And I realize that with these companies, there might be some wrong things. I'm going to talk about the positive things now, but I'm definitely realizing there might be wrong things. So the case study I'm going to present to you is the vegetarian butcher. Again, I have no relationship with them at all. I do know the owners or the founders, but other than that, I'm not involved. So the vegetarian butcher. Who here has heard of the company? Who has tasted their products? Okay. So this story started in 2005 when the guy here on the left, his name is Jaap Korteweg, met the guy on the right. And I'm also showing Jaap Korteweg's former wife. She is the longtime president, or she was the longtime president, and the founder of the Dutch Party for the Animals. I think you're familiar with that. It's a hugely successful political party that has been, giving an incredible example for the entire world. The things that they have accomplished are really amazing. It's just to show that Jaap Korteweg also is in it for the animals. Nico Kofferman actually was one of the founders also and strategist behind the Party for the Animals. So these two people met accidentally rather, and Jaap was an organic farmer. He went vegetarian in the time of the disease that killed a lot of pigs, and they asked him to stock a lot of dead pigs in one of his big hangars, and he found that so weird and strange at that moment he went vegetarian. And they met, and Jaap explained to Nico that he still had a bit of problem being a vegetarian because the products were not good. Nico didn't understand this because he had grown up as a vegetarian. And they talked about setting up a company, and it needed some thought, and it needed money. They put their own money in, and in 2010 they opened the Vegetarian Butcher, which was, and maybe still is, a store in The Hague, where they just sold all kinds of the best vegetarian and vegan products. And they did quite well. They did especially great in brand building and in marketing. They won the Dutch Marketing Awards. They did very cute things with plays with words. You wouldn't understand them if you don't speak Dutch, but really very creative advertising. And here is a little idea of what they did later. They would do later in English. You see the funny names like a chickened out burger and the Unbelievables and things like that. Or here the Auf Wiederschnitzel, things that are quite well thought of. In 2015, they set up a factory, their own factory to produce their meat substitutes. And they had hoped to they crowdfunded the money for the factory, and they had hoped to collect 500,000 euros in half a year, and in a couple of months they had 2.5 million euros. So it was very successful at that time already. But the big breakthrough came when Unilever bought them end of 2018. So Unilever is like a house of brands. They sell all these brands, and one of the brands that they wanted to add to their portfolio was the Vegetarian Butcher. And at that time, of course, there were many people who were like, thinking this was selling out to big business and selling out their ideals, etc. And I've asked the founders, or Nico, about the advantages and disadvantages that came with selling to the Vegetarian Butcher. And I'm going to illustrate these now. So by now, the Vegetarian Butcher is available in retail in 45 countries. Eventually, they will be available in retail in 190 countries. All 190 countries that Unilever is active in. Do you know how many countries there are in the world? 195. So Unilever is almost everywhere in the world. And they have these contracts with these retailers everywhere. And they, of course, can facilitate the fact that these products are offered in every place on earth, basically. In 2020, the vegetarian butcher, their product, their burger, was the burger that was introduced in Burger King as the plant-based Whopper. So if you eat a plant-based Whopper in Burger King, it's the vegetarian butcher's product that's in there. In Europe, at least, in the United States, it's Impossible Foods. Okay? And later, other products would follow after the Whopper. These will or have been already added to the menu: Vegan Royale and the chicken nuggets, etc., etc. So they're doing quite well. In 2021, maybe you've seen this somewhere in Germany. I forget the town. There was a pop-up Burger King that was all vegan, all vegetarian butcher, just as a proof of concept, basically. It was temporary. Unilever has, in the meantime, set a new ambition to get $1 billion in 5 to 7 years out of their meat alternatives. And they have bought, for instance, another company here, a company called Enough, fermentation company, to just improve, basically, the vegetarian butcher products. They also have other brands many other brands next to the vegetarian butcher. One of them is Unox, which is an age-old brand in the Netherlands of classic sausages and other meat products. And this brand wants to, or is, introducing for every meat product that they have a vegetarian or vegan alternative, right? They're also working on awareness. Because of their deep pockets, Unilever can advertise kind of everywhere. With the money from just the vegetarian butcher before they were being bought, that was not possible, right? Like, doing these kind of campaigns takes quite some resources. This is another way of raising awareness. They have the vegetarian or vegan label on 700 of their products, which not only raises awareness, but also makes some money go back to vegetarian and vegan organizations who own this label and who get like some kickback from it, some commission on it. And raising awareness even in more in deeper ways. This is a little booklet that people get when they were buying two Unox, of that brand that I talk about, products. Even if they bought one meat and one vegetarian Unox product, they got a booklet like this. And this booklet is titled Anna's Animal World, and it's about a little girl that loves animals so much that she rescues them from drowning in a pond, and she actually sabotages her father's store, which is a butcher store, and she's a very big friend of the animals. So that's the booklet that people get when they buy a Unox sausage, whether it's a vegetarian one or a non-vegetarian one. You wouldn't expect that of a company like that. Another thing that happened is that the price of the products has gone down in the meantime since Unilever took it over. You know that price is a very, very important factor. We still need to get the prices of the meat substitutes down, because otherwise people are not going to buy them, or not enough people are going to buy them. They're also doing discounts. A discount, maybe you know that, discount implies some costs for the producer. They have to advertise these discounts within the retail, within the supermarkets, etc. So that's also something that otherwise might not happen. There has been also a kind of a domino effect. The vegetarian butcher products were first introduced in the Netherlands in the Jumbo supermarket, and then Jumbo copied, or other supermarkets copied what Jumbo did, and so all supermarkets also in other countries started to give more and more attention. There's another thing. So suppose you are the vegetarian butcher, or you have your own meat substitute company, and you say, we want to be big, we want to produce for Burger King. Do you think that, like, if Burger King wanted to offer a vegetarian product, that you could deliver it to them as a small company? Do you think that you could deliver to retail, to like a big supermarket, to Tesco or to whatever, to Carrefour? It's really very difficult logistically. There's a lot of risk that you take, because if you can't meet the demand that they have, you will get fired. Also, there's the problem of like buying enough ingredients. You know, you have to have buying power to buy the ingredients that you need. And if you can't buy them, you can't produce your product, you have a logistic problem, you get fined, etc. So all this is remedied by being part of the Unilever family that has this buying power, etc., and that has these good relationships with the supermarkets, etc. This is another way of raising awareness. Unilever also has a Vegetarian Butchers Academy, where they train people at Unilever, not just in the history of the vegetarian butcher as a company, but also in the advantages and the importance of making society more plant-based. And the people actually get an award, a vegetarian or some sort of vegetarian butcher award, when they have done this course. This is the Food Innovation Center of Unilever in Wageningen in the Netherlands, where, and this is another advantage, they can invest a lot of money in making these products still better. And then another thing, have you heard of the burger ban? The idea that burgers should not get names of vegetarian burgers or vegan burgers or products should not get meat names. So you should not be able, the meat industry says, you should not be able to call a vegan burger a burger, because it's supposedly misleading for the consumer, right? And we see that big companies like Unilever have been against this ban. Why? Because they're now already invested in selling their own products. So this ban goes against their interest, and they can now be against the ban. So as soon as we have a big company having a stake in plant-based, the antagonism towards plant-based, of course, is going down, and it might even start to defend it and start to fund it. So all of this means that the ambition of Jaap Korteweg and Nico Koffieman that they had from the beginning might just become true. And this ambition was no small thing. They wanted to become the biggest butcher in the world, a butcher without meat. And they're actually on their way of doing this, thanks to being bought by a big company. They could not have done this on their own. And the story still doesn't end there, because of course selling to Unilever got these people a lot of money. That's one of the things they don't want to tell me, how much money they actually made by selling to Unilever, but it was a significant amount of money. And with that money, they started a new company. And Jaap's dream actually was always to take the cow out of the food chain. And they started with meat, and now they want to do the same with milk. Have you heard of their new company? Those vegan cowboys? So they are cowboys, but vegan cowboys. And they want to, and this is crucial and innovative, they want to make milk from grass. Because grass is a very cheap thing that grows everywhere. They want to do what a cow does. They want to make a mechanical cow that turns the grass into milk. And with the money from the sale of the vegetarian butcher, they bought a company in Ghent, in Belgium, that was doing medical research, but the medicine had been developed, and actually that company with the 12 staff that they had no more reason to exist, so it had to be disbanded. But then the vegetarian butcher people saw that there was like a big link between what these people did for medical research and what they would have to do to develop milk, and they bought the company, and the staff is still on board with a lot of expertise. And they are trying to come up with the formula for this milk. And they give themselves 7 years to develop that. They have also, again, with that money, awarded they have promised 2.5 million euros for the person, the researcher, the student, whoever, who can come up with the ideal fungus that should help with the fermentation process of turning grass into milk. This is again a nice wordplay. I don't know who speaks Dutch here, but or maybe it's the same in German, I don't know. But schimmel is the word in Dutch for both a horse and a fungus. So it fits perfectly with the cowboy imagery, right? But they're looking for a fungus that can help them do that. Because it's going to take quite a few years, they've already also started to collaborate with Westland, which is a traditional cheese company, and they have developed together with them vegan versions of their traditional dairy cheeses. And they told me that Westland, which is a traditional dairy company, actually wants to ideally go vegan by the year 2036, I believe. And they are getting also a lot of inquiries from big dairy companies asking them what they're doing and how they can collaborate, because the big dairy companies are seeing what is going to happen in the future. So that is the story of the vegetarian butcher. I think it's a wonderful story. I think it's incredibly impressive what these people have done. There are some things to consider, of course. If you still have questions, if you still have doubts about this scaling up, the value of small companies being bought by bigger companies, or bigger companies getting into the vegan thing, etc., even while they're not vegan themselves, etc. Let me point out a couple of things. We're not there yet, not at all. You know, we are still a very small segment of the population that gets this, that gets what you and I are getting. If we want to change people, and that's what we eventually have to do, change all the people in the world, we can give them arguments to raise awareness, and we can give them alternatives, alternative products to change their behavior, right? And the lower the quality and the lower the availability of these alternatives, the higher the required effort, the more effort people have to make. I went vegan 22 years ago. That took a lot more effort back then than it does now, right? So what we need is this situation, a lot of alternatives of very high quality available everywhere, and the effort will go down. We don't want people to have to make a lot of effort. Right now, again, vegans are a very small part of the population, and it could be that the people who can be convinced with moral reasons have been convinced. It could be that you and I are the low-hanging fruit, and that the rest of the people has to be convinced by especially making stuff a lot easier for them. So that's the importance of creating alternatives in general. Secondly, the concern that you may have, and that I hear all the time within the movement, is like, yeah, but it's all about the money. These people are in it for the money. And that is, unfortunately, to a high extent true, but not entirely. I would say it's not black and white. First of all, there are activists, or there are entrepreneurs who are also activists. There is this cross-section here. Here's two examples. Paul Shapiro, a well-known animal rights activist who started the Better Meat Company. And Christine Middleton, another activist with HSUS, who's now working at Rebellious Foods, also a plant-based alternative company. There is a very big spectrum of companies now. On the one hand, you have companies that are entirely profit. On the other hand, you have organizations that are entirely non-profit for the social purpose. And there's all kinds of things in between: hybrid models, social enterprises, etc. People companies who are very responsible, or on the other hand, non-profits who are making money with some goods and services, etc. So there's a spectrum. You can't see it as a black and white thing. I think it's also, and maybe you're angry when I say that, but I think it's also unfair to think that all the business people are just evil money grabbers who don't care about anything but money. I think there's really quite some good people in there. They are, of course, part of the system. They earn an indecent amounts of money, but they might be quite a few in there who are doing their best to make the world a better place. But then, even if it is all about money for many of those people, even if all they want to do is get richer, well, I think we have to be very happy today that money has become a driver for this change. If the change is only driven by environmental concerns, by animal concerns, etc., it's only those idealists who will get into this game. But as soon as money can be made with this, and people are motivated to get money, to earn money, they get into that for that reason. They might be very, very motivated to do it and might be very successful, right? So there is, at this moment, enormous potential for the plant-based sector, and there are people getting in it just for the money. And I think we have to just accept that, at least for now. And we have to also make a difference between intentions versus results. If one's intention is to make a lot of money, but the results are that a lot of suffering and a lot of injustice is reduced, well, what's so bad about that? It's not as if the cows in the factory farms are saying like, yeah, we might get out, but yeah, I don't like it because it's all about the money, right? The pigs really do not care what the intentions are of the people that are getting them out, even though I love it personally when people have the best intentions. And then there's the last comment, like, yeah, what has it to do with veganism? Like, if everybody starts consuming vegan products, it's just a consumer lifestyle, but people haven't integrated the vegan ideas. They don't necessarily do it for animals, they don't necessarily like animals, and maybe if something else comes along, they will go back to eating animals. Well, the thing is that, and some of you may have seen this in other talks that I give, but we try as activists always to influence people's behavior, and we hope that they will influence people's attitude. And from there, we hope that they change their behavior, but it also goes the other way around. When people start eating differently, for whatever reason, to whatever degree, because these products are merely available, perhaps, it becomes a lot easier to change your attitude. In English, they say, where you stand depends on where you sit. Your opinion about something depends on your position, on your behavior. And you can imagine that if there's no more sacrifice to be made, people will have much easier time listening to all our animal rights arguments, and they have a much easier time agreeing with us. So these alternatives are crucial also in terms of changing attitudes and beliefs and convictions of people in terms of what they think about animals. What can we as activists do within this whole changing space? There's several things. I mean, we can basically choose a position on the spectrum between opposing this scaling up and collaborating with it. On the very far end, I hope nobody's doing it, but we used to do that at some time, is blowing these things up. On the other end is really promoting them. And you can choose. You can, for instance, boycott. I don't know how useful boycotts are. Sometimes they might be, sometimes they're not. Like there was a boycott or a call for a boycott for Daiya cheese when it was bought by a Japanese pharmaceutical company that did some animal testing. So yeah, we can boycott, and you can boycott that if that makes you feel better. I don't know how much it's going to do really. I do think that we can keep putting pressure on companies to continue to improve. We don't want them to just be vegan. We also want them to produce healthy products, affordable, fair trade, local, seasonal, low impact, diverse. We want their teams to be diverse, etc. So they can improve in a lot of ways, and we can certainly keep the pressure on. And we have consumer power, of course. We cannot just leave it to the market and think that everything will be okay. We have an important job. And we also have the job to keep raising awareness, to keep talking to people. This is what we do best in non-profit organizations and as activists, is to keep raising awareness. Because it's not a given that all these companies that produce vegan alternatives will survive. It might be that the demand for all of these companies is still not there. So we have to keep increasing demand. This game is not done yet. So in conclusion, turning back to this guy, Nico Koffeman, who I asked about the advantages and the disadvantages of being bought by the vegetarian butcher. In terms of disadvantages, he couldn't really name much. He couldn't really say what was bad about being bought by Unilever. He said, perhaps the fact that maybe our little store and our pop-up restaurant, maybe they won't be coming back. They're closed now for Corona and for some road work or construction work, but they might not be coming back. And he said, yeah, we might have wanted to keep them, and yeah, maybe not. So if you can't get the products in this store anymore or in this restaurant anymore, well, you can get them still, of course, in many more places. These places are not as cute and not as feel good. They're god ugly places, like this and this. And yeah, something gets lost. It's true. And I don't want a world where we just have only these big multinational companies and no independent business owners and no social neighborly feeling, etc., etc. So that's not the world I want. But right now, I think our job as a movement is to convince 7 billion people to stop eating 70 billion animals every year. Seafood, fishes excluded, right? And that's not going to happen by being small. For that to happen, the big companies have to get a lot better. The small, good companies have to get a lot bigger. And all of us have to keep doing the great work that we're doing. until all of this is just a bad memory. Thank you very much.